In a quiet little town surrounded by dense woods and nestled close to an army base, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The locals were used to seeing soldiers in uniform passing through. But today, someone different caught their attention. Sarah Jennings, a young woman with sharp eyes and a confident stride, walked into the bustling diner that served as the heart of the community. By her side were two imposing German shepherds, Titan and Luna. Their sleek coats gleamed under the sunlight streaming through the windows, and their alert expressions made it clear they weren't ordinary pets. The diner buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of cutlery against plates. Most patrons barely glanced up when Sarah entered, but her arrival didn't go unnoticed for long. Titan and Luna's presence commanded respect, even if not everyone understood why. As Sarah settled into a booth near the corner, ordering a simple meal of grilled chicken and fries, whispers began to ripple through the room. Some people admired the dog's discipline. Others wondered what kind of person could command such powerful animals so effortlessly. At a nearby table, a group of bikers lounged, their leather jackets creaking as they shifted in their seats. They had been enjoying their usual Friday afternoon routine: loud jokes, hearty laughs, and cold beers. But now their focus shifted entirely to Sarah and her companions. Leading the group was Jake Iron Malone, a burly man with tattoos covering his arms and a reputation for being quick with both his fists and his tongue. He leaned back in his chair, eyeing Sarah with a smirk. "Look at this," Jake said loudly enough for everyone to hear, gesturing toward Sarah and her dogs. "A girl playing soldier. What's next? Are those mutts gonna salute us too?" His friends erupted in laughter, slapping the table and egging him on. A few curious glances darted between the bikers and Sarah, waiting to see how she'd react. But Sarah didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she calmly stroked Luna's head, her fingers moving gently over the dog's soft fur. Her calmness only seemed to irritate Jake more. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" He called out mockingly. "You scared your guard dogs might bite me? Or are you just embarrassed because deep down, you know you don't belong here?" Sarah took a slow sip of water, setting the glass down without making eye contact with Jake. She knew better than to engage with someone like him, someone who thrived on provoking reactions. Still, the tension in the air was palpable. The other diners exchanged uneasy looks, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. Even the waitress hesitated before approaching Sarah's table to refill her drink. Jake wasn't done yet. Emboldened by his friend's encouragement, he stood up and swaggered closer to Sarah's booth. Towering over her, he planted his hands on the table, leaning in until his face was inches from hers. "Come on, prove me wrong," he taunted. "Show me these dogs are worth all the fuss, or are they just big, fluffy showpieces?" For a moment, there was silence. Sarah finally looked up, meeting Jake's gaze with steely determination. Without saying a word, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small treat, offering it to Luna. The dog sniffed it once, then sat perfectly still, waiting for permission to take it. It was a subtle move, but one that spoke volumes about the bond between handler and animal. Jake snorted, unimpressed. "Big deal," he muttered, stepping back. "Let's see something real." Little did he know, Sarah was already planning her response, and it would leave a lasting impression on everyone in that diner. Despite Jake's loud taunts and the growing tension in the diner, Sarah remained unfazed. She had faced far worse during her time as a K-9 handler: hostile environments, dangerous missions, and skeptics who doubted her ability simply because she was a woman. This wasn't new territory for her. Her priority was keeping Titan and Luna calm, ensuring their focus stayed sharp despite the chaos around them. The dogs seemed to sense her composure, mirroring it with their own quiet confidence. They sat obediently by her side, their ears flicking occasionally at the noise, but otherwise remaining still. Jake, however, wasn't ready to let things drop. He circled the table like a predator sizing up its prey, his boots thudding heavily against the diner floor. His friends egged him on from their seats, hollering encouragements that only fueled his bravado. "Come on, princess," he sneered, leaning down again. "You're telling me those dogs are some kind of super soldiers. Prove it." Sarah finally spoke, her voice steady and measured. "My dogs aren't here to entertain you," she said firmly, her eyes locking onto his. "They're trained professionals, not circus acts. If you want to see what they can do, you'll have to respect them first." Jake threw his head back and laughed, clearly amused by her response. "Respect? For a couple of mutts." He turned to his buddies, spreading his arms wide. "Did you hear that? She thinks I'm gonna bow down to her puppies." The other diners exchanged nervous glances. Some looked irritated by Jake's behavior, while others seemed worried about where this confrontation might lead. Sarah, though, didn't flinch. Instead, she reached down and gave Titan a reassuring pat. The dog tilted his head slightly, his intelligent gaze never leaving Jake. It was almost as if Titan understood the situation better than anyone else in the room. Jake noticed the exchange and snorted. "Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're serious with all this professional nonsense." He took another step closer, pointing a finger at Sarah. "If these dogs are so tough, why don't you show us right now? Or are you too scared?" Sarah sighed inwardly, recognizing the futility of reasoning with someone like Jake. Still, she decided to try one last time. "I'm not here to put on a show," she replied calmly. "But if you insist, we can step outside. Just remember, one rule. Follow my instructions. No exceptions." Her tone carried an unspoken authority that caught Jake off guard. For a brief moment, he hesitated, unsure whether to call her bluff or back down. But pride got the better of him. Straightening up, he crossed his arms over his chest and smirked. "Fine. Outside. Let's see what your precious pooches can really do." As Sarah stood up, grabbing the leashes attached to Titan and Luna, the entire diner fell silent. People craned their necks to get a better view, whispering among themselves about what might happen next. Even the waitress paused mid-step, holding a tray of food frozen in midair. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Jake led the way, strutting toward the exit with exaggerated confidence. His gang trailed behind him, eager to watch the spectacle unfold. Sarah followed at a steady pace, her posture relaxed yet alert. Titan and Luna walked beside her, their movements fluid and synchronized. To anyone paying attention, it was obvious they were no ordinary dogs. They exuded discipline and control, traits honed through years of rigorous training. Once outside, the group gathered in the parking lot. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the asphalt, and a gentle breeze rustled the nearby trees. Jake spun around dramatically, gesturing toward the open space. "All right, Miss Handler," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Impress me. Show me what makes these dogs so special." Sarah didn't respond immediately. Instead, she surveyed the area, mentally mapping out the demonstration. Then, without warning, she issued a single command: "Sit." Instantly, Titan and Luna dropped into perfect sitting positions, their bodies rigid and focused. Jake blinked in surprise, momentarily taken aback by their precision, but he quickly masked his reaction with a scoff. "That's it?" he asked, crossing his arms again. "Big deal. Any dog can sit." Sarah ignored him, issuing another command: "Down." Both dogs flattened themselves onto the ground simultaneously, their chins resting lightly on the pavement. Again, Jake feigned disinterest, rolling his eyes for effect. But his friends weren't so dismissive. One of them muttered under his breath, "That's kinda impressive." Sarah continued, demonstrating basic obedience drills with increasing complexity. Each command was met with flawless execution from Titan and Luna. By the time she finished, even Jake had to admit, at least to himself, that there was something remarkable about the dogs. Yet his ego refused to let him concede defeat just yet. "Okay, fine," he admitted begrudgingly. "Your dogs listen well. But that doesn't mean they're anything special. Real-world situations are different. Can they handle actual threats? His words hung in the air, daring Sarah to take the challenge further. And though she knew it would be easier to walk away, something in her clicked. This wasn't just about proving a point. It was about showing people like Jake the true value of hard work, dedication, and trust. With a small nod, she replied, "Let's find out." The stage was set, and the real test was about to begin. The parking lot buzzed with anticipation as Sarah prepared for the next phase of the demonstration. Jake stood a few feet away, arms crossed and lips curled into a smug grin, still convinced that nothing Sarah or her dogs did would change his mind. His friends formed a loose semicircle around them, some leaning against their motorcycles while others squinted in the sunlight, trying to get a better view. The tension was thick, but Sarah remained calm, her focus unwavering. "All right," she said, her voice clear and authoritative, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Let's make this more realistic. I'll set up a scenario, a mock exercise, to show you what Titan and Luna are trained for." She glanced at Jake, adding firmly, "But remember, if you want to see real results, you need to stay out of their way unless I tell you otherwise. These dogs are highly disciplined, but they're also protective. Understand?" Jake hesitated for a split second, caught off guard by the seriousness in her tone. Still, he wasn't about to back down now. With a shrug, he replied, "Sure, whatever. Just hurry up and show us something worth watching." Sarah nodded and turned her attention to Titan and Luna. She gave them a quick once-over, checking their harnesses and ensuring they were ready. Then, using hand signals and soft-spoken commands, she positioned them strategically in the open space. To the onlookers, it looked like she was choreographing a dance, each movement precise, intentional, and fluid. The dogs responded instantly, moving exactly where she directed without hesitation. She began explaining the setup to the group. "This is a basic obstacle course," she said, pointing to various objects scattered around the parking lot. Traffic cones, an overturned trash can, and even a wooden pallet someone had left behind. Titan and Luna will navigate through these obstacles while responding to my commands. They'll simulate identifying threats, securing areas, and protecting me if necessary. Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Sounds fancy, but how do we know they're not just running around because you told them to? Where's the proof they'd actually stop a threat?" Sarah smiled faintly, unfazed by his doubt. "You'll see soon enough," she replied. Turning to Titan, she issued her first command, "Search." Instantly, the dog sprang into action, weaving gracefully between the cones and sniffing the ground with purpose. Within moments, he stopped near the overturned trash can, arcing sharply to signal he'd detected something unusual. It was a textbook example of how military dogs locate hidden dangers during patrols. The bikers exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. One of them muttered, "Huh, that's kinda cool." Another chimed in, "Yeah, maybe there's more to it than we thought." Jake, however, wasn't convinced. He waved dismissively. "So your dog found a trash can. Big deal. Anyone could train a mutt to bark at random stuff." Sarah didn't argue. Instead, she moved on to the next part of the demonstration. This time, she focused on Luna. "Guard," she commanded, gesturing toward the wooden pallet. Luna immediately stationed herself in front of it, her body low and alert, eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. When Jake made a half-hearted attempt to step closer, Luna let out a low growl, stopping him in his tracks. "Whoa!" Jake exclaimed, raising his hands defensively. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He took a cautious step backward, and Luna relaxed slightly, but only after Sarah gave her a reassuring nod. The small victory didn't go unnoticed by the gathered crowd. Some of the bikers chuckled nervously, impressed by the dog's reaction. Others whispered comments like, "Man, that thing's fast. And I wouldn't want to mess with her." Jake tried to brush it off, laughing awkwardly. Okay, so they got some tricks. But what about real pressure? Like, say, if someone came at you for real, would they really protect you? Sarah paused, considering his question. She knew this was the moment Jake had been waiting for, the ultimate test of her dog's capabilities. And truthfully, she welcomed it. Not to prove anything to Jake, but to showcase the incredible bond and training that went into working with military K-9 units. With quiet confidence, she looked directly at Jake and said, "If you're serious about seeing what they can do, then fine. Let's take it one step further. Are you willing to volunteer?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jake blinked, caught off guard. He glanced at his friends, who were suddenly less eager to egg him on. For a brief moment, doubt flickered across his face, but then his pride kicked in, and he squared his shoulders, forcing a cocky grin. "You think I'm scared? Bring it on. Let's see what your dogs are really made of." The crowd leaned in, breathless, as Sarah prepared for the most intense part of the demonst. Jake's bravado was unmistakable as he stepped forward, trying his best to mask the unease creeping into his expression. The parking lot had gone eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. All eyes were on Sarah, Titan, and Luna, waiting to see what would happen next. Even Jake's friends seemed to hold their breath, their earlier jeers replaced by a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Sarah didn't waste any time. She gave Jake a firm look, her tone steady but commanding. "Listen carefully," she said. "This isn't a game. My dogs are trained to neutralize threats quickly and efficiently. If you volunteer for this exercise, you need to trust that I'll keep it controlled, but you also need to understand that they're serious about protecting me. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Jake hesitated for just a fraction of a second before nodding sharply. Yeah, I got it," he muttered, though his voice lacked its usual swagger. Deep down, he was starting to realize that Sarah wasn't bluffing. There was something unnervingly professional about the way she carried herself, and the way her dogs mirrored her every move. Sarah turned her attention back to Titan and Luna, issuing a series of commands under her breath. Both dogs shifted into high alert, their bodies tense and focused. Titan positioned himself slightly ahead of Sarah, while Luna moved to flank her other side. Their postures screamed readiness, as if they were soldiers preparing for battle. The transformation was striking, and even Jake couldn't help but take a small step backward, his confidence wavering. "All right," Sarah announced, addressing the group. "Here's how this will work. I'm going to simulate a threat scenario. Jake will act as the threat, approaching me aggressively. Titan and Luna will respond accordingly. Remember, this is all controlled. They won't harm him unless absolutely necessary. But make no mistake, they will stop him." The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, some muttering quietly among themselves. One of them leaned over to another and whispered, "Man, I don't envy him right now." Another nodded, adding, "Those dogs look like they mean business." Jake swallowed hard but forced a laugh, trying to play it cool. "Piece of cake," he said, though his voice cracked slightly at the end. He squared his shoulders, attempting to project confidence as he stepped closer to Sarah. "Let's get this over with." Sarah raised a hand, signaling for him to pause. "Wait for my signal," she instructed. Then, turning to Titan and Luna, she gave a single command: "Protect." The air seemed to shift instantly. Both dogs locked onto Jake, their eyes sharp and unyielding. It was as if they had transformed from calm companions into highly skilled guardians in the blink of an eye. When Sarah finally gave Jake the go-ahead with a nod, he hesitated again, visibly steeling himself. Taking a deep breath, he began walking toward her, deliberately exaggerating his movements to appear threatening. He clenched his fists, scowled, and quickened his pace, clearly trying to intimidate her, or perhaps test the limits of her dog's training. But before he could even reach her, Titan sprang into action. With lightning speed, the dog darted forward, cutting off Jake's path and letting out a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down everyone's spines. Jake froze mid-step, his bravado crumbling. His arms shot up instinctively, palms out, as if surrendering to an invisible force. Luna joined in immediately, circling around Jake to block any escape route. Her movements were fluid yet calculated, her teeth bared just enough to convey the seriousness of the situation. Together, the two dogs formed an impenetrable barrier between Jake and Sarah, their teamwork flawless. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were Jake's ragged breathing and the faint hum of the wind. Finally, Sarah raised her hand and called out, "Stand down." Instantly, Titan and Luna backed away, resuming their calm, obedient stances beside her. Their sudden shift from aggressive protectors to composed companions left the entire crowd speechless. Jake staggered back a few steps, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. He glanced at the dogs, then at Sarah, struggling to process what had just happened. "Okay," he stammered, running a shaky hand through his hair. I think I get it now." His friends erupted into nervous laughter, clapping him on the shoulder as if to break the tension. "Looks like you met your match, Iron," one of them joked, though there was genuine awe in his voice. Another chimed in, "Man, those dogs are legit." Jake stood frozen, his bravado shattered like glass. The parking lot, once filled with jeers and taunts, was now eerily silent except for the sound of his heavy breathing. He stared at Titan and Luna, who had returned to their calm, composed positions beside Sarah. Their transformation from fierce protectors back to obedient companions was seamless, almost surreal. Jake's mind raced as he tried to reconcile the image of these dogs with the mocking assumptions he'd made earlier. Sarah rose slowly to her feet, brushing off her jeans as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. She glanced at Jake, her expression unreadable but not unkind. "Still think it's all an act?" she asked, her voice soft yet firm. Jake hesitated, his pride warring with the undeniable truth in front of him. Finally, he shook his head, avoiding eye contact. "No," he admitted gruffly. "Guess I was wrong." His words hung in the air, surprising even his own friends. They exchanged glances, some nodding approvingly while others smirked, clearly enjoying seeing their usually cocky leader humbled. One of them called out teasingly, "Hey, Iron, maybe next time you'll listen before running your mouth." Jake shot him a glare, but there was no real malice behind it. Instead, he turned his attention back to Sarah, his tone softer now. "Look, I didn't mean to disrespect you or your dogs. I was just messing around, you know. But, well, that was something else entirely." Sarah nodded, accepting his apology without hesitation. "It's fine," she said simply. "But remember this, my dogs aren't here to entertain anyone. They're trained to do a job, to protect, serve, and respond when needed. And they take that job seriously. It's not about showing off. It's about trust and teamwork." Her words resonated with everyone present, including Jake. For the first time, he truly understood what she meant. These weren't just pets or props. They were highly skilled partners, extensions of Sarah herself. The bond between handler and dog was evident in every movement, every command, and every reaction. It wasn't arrogance that fueled their actions, it was purpose. To lighten the mood, Sarah decided to give one final demonstration, a simulated scenario involving obstacles and target practice. Using items scattered around the parking lot, she quickly set up a mock course. Traffic cones became barriers, an old tire leaned against a wall served as a tunnel, and a discarded piece of plywood acted as a makeshift ramp. She explained each element to the group, emphasizing how such setups mimicked real-world challenges faced during military operations. "Watch closely," she instructed, gesturing toward Titan and Luna. "They'll navigate through the course, locate a hidden threat, disarm it, and secure the area, all on command." The bikers leaned forward, intrigued. Even Jake perked up, eager to see more. As Sarah issued her first comment, "Advance," Titan took the lead, weaving effortlessly between the cones with precision and speed. Luna followed close behind, her movements equally sharp. When they reached the tire, Titan ducked underneath it without breaking stride, while Luna leaped over the plywood ramp with grace and power. The crowd erupted into spontaneous applause, unable to contain their admiration. "Man, those dogs are machines," one biker exclaimed. Another added, "I've never seen anything like it." Finally, Sarah introduced the last part of the exercise, a dummy placed near the far end of the lot, designed to simulate a hostile target. With a single hand signal, she directed Titan and Luna to approach cautiously. Both dogs circled the dummy, sniffing it briefly before pinning it down with practiced efficiency. Titan gripped the dummy's arm gently but firmly, while Luna positioned herself to block any escape routes. The entire sequence took less than 30 seconds. When Sarah called them off with a sharp whistle, the dogs immediately returned to her side, tails wagging slightly as if proud of their performance. The bikers cheered loudly, clapping and whistling in appreciation. Even Jake joined in, though his applause was quieter, tinged with respect rather than mockery. As the excitement began to die down, Sarah knelt beside Titan and Luna, giving them each a loving pat. "Good job, boys and girls," she said warmly. Then, standing up, she addressed the group. "This is what years of training looks like. It's not about dominance or intimidation. It's about partnership. Every command, every response is built on trust." Jake stepped forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity. "How long does it take to train dogs like this?" he asked, his tone respectful for the first time. "A lot longer than you'd think," Sarah replied with a small smile. "And it's not just about teaching commands. It's about building a relationship. That's what makes them so effective and so special." For the first time, the mood in the parking lot had shifted dramatically. The earlier tension and mockery were replaced by a sense of awe and admiration, even from Jake. He stood quietly for a moment, watching as Sarah praised Titan and Luna for their flawless performance. Her bond with her dogs was undeniable. Every touch, every word carried a deep connection that went beyond training. It wasn't just obedience, it was trust, respect, and partnership. Jake cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "So, can I ask you something?" His voice lacked its usual bravado, replaced instead with genuine curiosity. Sarah glanced up, arching an eyebrow, but nodding. "Sure. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "I've seen police dogs before, but they're nothing like yours. How do you get them to, I don't know, act so precise, so disciplined?" Sarah smiled faintly, appreciating the sincerity in his question. She crouched down beside Titan and Luna, scratching behind their ears affectionately before answering. "It's not just about teaching commands," she explained. "It's about building a relationship. These dogs aren't machines. They're living, breathing partners. They learn because they want to work with me. And that takes time, patience, and consistency." Jake nodded slowly, absorbing her words. For the first time, he seemed genuinely interested in understanding rather than mocking. "How long does all that take?" he pressed. "Like, how many years do you spend with them?" "Years," Sarah confirmed. "Titan here has been with me since he was a puppy. Same with Luna. We train together almost every day. Basic obedience at first, then more advanced skills like tracking, protection, and tactical maneuvers. But it's not just physical training. You have to build their confidence, teach them problem solving, and make sure they trust you completely." One of Jake's friends chimed in, leaning forward curiously. "What happens if they mess up? Do you, punish them or something?" Sarah shook her head firmly. "No, never punishment. That's not how it works. If they make a mistake, we correct it calmly and guide them back on track. Positive reinforcement is key. Treats, praise, playtime, all those things help reinforce good behavior. It's about showing them what's expected without fear." Jake frowned thoughtfully, clearly processing this new perspective. Huh. Never thought about it like that. He paused, glancing at Titan and Luna, who were now lying contentedly at Sarah's feet. You really love what you do, don't you? Sarah chuckled softly, her expression softening. Yeah, I do. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. These dogs are incredible. They save lives, protect people, and they give everything they've got. All they ask in return is care and respect. Her words struck a chord with Jake, and perhaps even more so with his friends. The bikers exchanged glances, some nodding approvingly while others muttered comments under their breath. One of them said, "Man, after seeing all this, I kinda wish I'd trained my dog better." Another laughed nervously. "Yeah, maybe we should all take notes." Jake ignored their teasing, his focus still on Sarah. He took a step closer, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Look, I'm sorry for being such a jerk earlier. I didn't mean any disrespect. Not to you. And definitely not to your dogs. Guess I judged too quickly." Sarah smiled, acknowledging his apology graciously. "Apology accepted. Just remember, it's okay to admit when you're wrong. Everyone makes mistakes. It's how you handle them that matters." Jake nodded, looking almost sheepish. "Yeah, well, lesson learned. Thanks for showing us. Whatever this is." He gestured vaguely toward the makeshift course and the dogs. "It's pretty damn impressive." As the group began to disperse, the atmosphere felt lighter, friendlier. Some of the bikers lingered, asking Sarah questions about her training methods or sharing stories about their own pets. Others offered handshakes or pats on the back, expressing their newfound respect for her and her dogs. Even Jake stuck around, lingering near the edge of the group, seemingly unsure whether to leave or stay. Finally, he approached Sarah one last time, his tone hesitant but sincere. "Hey, listen, if you ever need anything, or, feel like grabbing a drink sometime, you're welcome to join us. No strings attached, just thanks for today." The joke broke the ice, earning laughter from everyone nearby, including Jake. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the parking lot, Sarah gathered her things and prepared to leave. Titan and Lena rose obediently to their feet, ready to follow wherever she led. For Jake and his gang, the encounter had been more than just a demonstration. It was a lesson in humility, respect, and the power of second chances. And for Sarah, it was proof that even the toughest skeptics could change their minds. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the parking lot began to empty. The bikers mounted their motorcycles, revving engines, and exchanging parting jokes as they prepared to leave. But Jake lingered, standing awkwardly near Sarah's car, while Titan and Luna waited patiently by her side. There was something unspoken in his demeanor, a mix of gratitude and curiosity that hadn't quite faded. "You sure you don't want to grab a drink?" Jake asked again, scratching the back of his head. His tone was lighter now, almost playful, but there was sincerity beneath it. "My shout. Call it. I dunno. A peace offering." Sarah paused, considering the offer. She glanced at Titan and Luna, who were watching the exchange with calm, intelligent eyes. "I appreciate the gesture," she said finally, "but my partners here might not be welcome at your usual hangout spots." Jake chuckled, glancing at the dogs. "Yeah, fair point. Can't exactly bring them into a bar." "Not unless you want chaos," Sarah replied with a smirk. "But thanks anyway. Maybe another time." Jake nodded, though he looked slightly disappointed. He hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Listen, about earlier. I really am sorry. I didn't mean to come off like such a jerk. It's just, we're used to doing things our way. And sometimes we forget there's more out there than what we know." Sarah studied him for a moment, noting the honesty in his voice. "It's okay," she said simply. "We all have moments where we say or do things without thinking. What matters is how we learn from them." Her words seemed to resonate with Jake, who nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right. And hey, thanks for not holding a grudge. Most people would have told me to take a hike after all that. Sarah shrugged, smiling faintly. Holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. Besides, I think you learned something today. And so did your friends. Jake grinned, looking over his shoulder at the remaining bikers. Some were still chatting animatedly, recounting the day's events with wide eyes and exaggerated gestures. Others had already left, their roaring engines fading into the distance. Yeah, they won't let me live this down anytime soon, he admitted with a laugh. But honestly, seeing those dogs in action, it kinda opened my eyes. Made me realize how much goes into stuff I never even thought about. That's the thing about training, Sarah said, leaning casually against her car. It's not just about teaching commands or skills. It's about building trust. My dogs rely on me, and I rely on them. That connection takes years to develop, and it's something you can't fake. Jake nodded thoughtfully, his gaze drifting to Titan and Luna. You ever think about teaching others? Like showing people how to train their own dogs? Sarah tilted her head, considering the question. Sometimes. I've done a few workshops before, mostly for law enforcement handlers or search and rescue teams. But working with civilians is different. It takes patience, especially when they're starting from scratch. Well, if you ever decide to teach regular folks, count me in, Jake said earnestly. After today, I'd love to learn how to handle a dog properly. Heck, maybe I'll adopt one myself, though probably nothing like yours. Those two are in a league of their own. Sarah laughed softly, giving Titan and Luna an affectionate pat. They're pretty special, she admitted, but every dog has potential. It's all about finding the right match and putting in the effort. The conversation tapered off naturally, leaving a comfortable silence between them. Jake straightened up, extending a hand toward Sarah. Thanks again for everything. You didn't have to show us all that, but I'm glad you did. We needed a wake-up call. Sarah shook his hand firmly, her grip strong and confident. Anytime. Just remember, respect goes a long way, whether it's for people or animals. With that, Jake stepped back, giving her a final nod before turning to join his friends. As he walked away, Sarah couldn't help but notice the subtle change in his posture. Less defensive, more open. It was a small victory, but one that reminded her why she loved what she did. Every encounter, no matter how challenging, was an opportunity to inspire understanding and growth. She loaded Titan and Luna into the car, their tails wagging gently as they settled into their familiar spots. As she pulled out of the parking lot, the distant rumble of motorcycle engines faded behind her. The day had started with tension and mockery, but it ended with mutual respect and newfound admiration. For Sarah, it was proof that even the toughest barriers could be broken with patience, skill, and heart. And for Jake and his gang, it was a lesson they wouldn't soon forget, one that challenged their assumptions and broadened their perspective. Sometimes, all it took was a little demonstration and a lot of trust to turn. In the days that followed, Sarah's encounter with Jake and his gang became a topic of conversation far beyond the parking lot. Word spread quickly through the small town, how a quiet, unassuming woman and her two dogs had managed to silence some of the rowdiest bikers anyone had ever met. The story took on a life of its own, growing with each retelling. Some versions exaggerated the details, claiming Titan and Luna had performed incredible feats like leaping over cars or chasing down speeding motorcycles, which wasn't true, but it made for good storytelling. Others focused on the lesson itself, the idea that respect could be earned not through force, but through skill, patience, and understanding. Jake and his friends didn't shy away from sharing their side of the story either. At first, they joked about it, ribbing Jake for getting schooled by a pair of dogs. But as time went on, their tone shifted. They began talking about Sarah with genuine admiration, describing her as someone who commanded respect without demanding it. Even Jake, who had initially been the most vocal skeptic, couldn't stop praising her. She's tough as nails, He told anyone who'd listen, but she's fair. And those dogs. Man, they're something else. Their newfound appreciation didn't end with words. A few weeks later, Sarah was surprised to find Jake waiting outside her house one afternoon. He stood beside his motorcycle, looking nervous but determined. When she approached, he held out a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Here," he said gruffly. "It's nothing big, just, well, a thank you." Curious, Sarah unwrapped the gift to find a hand-carved wooden figurine of a German shepherd mid-stride, its features sharp and lifelike. It was clear that whoever had made it had put a lot of care into the details. "Did you make this?" she asked, genuinely impressed. Jake shook his head, chuckling. "Nah, I can barely hammer a nail straight. One of my buddies did it, said it reminded him of your dogs." Sarah smiled warmly, holding the figurine up to examine it closer. "It's beautiful. Thank you. And please tell your friend I love it." The gesture marked the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Over time, Jake and his gang started dropping by more often, not to cause trouble, but to learn. They asked questions about dog training, listened intently as Sarah explained the basics, and even brought their own pets along for impromptu lessons. It wasn't long before several of them adopted rescue dogs, inspired by Titan and Luna's discipline and loyalty. Jake himself became particularly invested, pouring hours into training his new companion, a scrappy mutt named Max, using techniques Sarah had taught him. For Sarah, these interactions were rewarding in ways she hadn't anticipated. She'd always known her work with K9 units was important, but seeing its ripple effect firsthand gave her a deeper sense of purpose. Watching hardened bikers transform into patient trainers and devoted pet owners proved that change was possible, even in the most unlikely places. Months later, the diner where it all began hosted a small gathering in Sarah's honor. The owner, grateful for the boost in business after the buzz her demonstration had created, invited her to share a meal with the locals. To everyone's delight, she arrived with Titan and Luna in tow, drawing cheers and applause from the crowd. Jake and his gang were there too, proudly showing off their own dogs, who now sat obediently by their sides. As the evening wore on, laughter filled the air, and stories flowed freely. People marveled at how much had changed since that fateful day in the parking lot. What had started as a clash of egos had blossomed into a community united by mutual respect and shared experiences. For Sarah, it was proof that sometimes the smallest actions could have the biggest impact. And for Jake and his friends, it was a reminder that growth often begins with humility and the willingness to admit when you're wrong. By the end of the night, as Sarah prepared to leave, Jake stopped her one last time. "You know what," he said, scratching Max's ears affectionately, "you've kinda changed us. For the better. Just wanted to say thanks again." Sarah grinned, giving Titan and Luna a final pat before heading out. "That's what partnerships are all about," she replied. "Learning, growing, and making each other stronger." And with that, she walked away, her dogs trotting happily beside her, leaving behind a legacy that would be remembered for years to come.